Dear Reddit, when was your oh shit I'm going to die moment but you didn't actually die? I'm allergic to bees. One time I got stung while sitting at a red light. It was a rental and I forgot my bag. No EpiPen. I turned into a car dealership and yelled to them to call 911. Within 4 minutes, which felt like an eternity, my throat completely closed. Last thing I remember is the guy who was with me yelling that I was blue. I don't know how long I was out, but as soon as the EMTs pushed the epinephrine I sprung back to life. Thank goodness they got there so quickly. The next day I brought the dealership and the EMTs baskets with cookies. Same here, allergic to bees. I was climbing in Tennessee and got stung by a yellow jacket. No EpiPen. And about 2 miles away from our campsite where we were parked. And another 10 plus miles from the nearest town. I just sat down and hoped for the best and expected the worst. I just remember the doctor telling me that the next time I got stung I would have less than 10 minutes to get the EP in me or I would die. I was 9 years old when it happened. I can't remember exactly how, but I wound up with a piece of candy lodged in my throat. My mother tried to give me the Heimlich, but wasn't able to. So she runs out the front door and starts screaming for help and I fall to my knees by the couch. And I don't know why but I never once thought, oh shit I'm dying. I was scared but I was more bothered my mom was upset. I honestly remember trying to tell her it was okay. Anyway, as my vision goes black and I feel myself just kinda slump to the ground, I feel 2 arms wrap around my midsection and yank me into the air and start squeezing and yanking and this dude telling me to spit it up and breath. I finally spit up the candy and start breathing and as my vision comes back, I see that it's the headbanger from next door. Dude was supposed to be at a Metallica concert but his ride never showed. So he was home doing whatever when he heard my mother screaming for help. Was an awesome guy. Taught me about comics. Taught me how to growl. Even influenced my musical preferences in some ways. So anyway, if you read this Trevor, thanks again for saving my life. This is gross, but about a year ago I woke up in the middle of the night with stomach pain. This isn't unusual since I have colitis. So I got up, grabbed a Calvin and Hobbes anthology, and prepared to spend some time in the bathroom. Normally the pain comes and goes and I can handle it. Unfortunately, this particular night I was horrifically backed up from nausea medication and couldn't go. I'd never had this happen before and suddenly the pain went from a manageable if unpleasant 5 to oh shit I might actually be calling 911. Unable to force anything out that way, I started vomiting uncontrollably. It honestly felt like my guts were being crushed by something. The only pain I can compare it to is like a Charlie horse but in your entire colon. I've got a high pain tolerance but at one point the pain kept getting worse and worse until I was pouring sweat and I had a real moment where I thought my guts might rupture or something. I panicked and things got real weird for a few minutes. My vision started going and I got really shocky. Dry mouth. More vomiting. I almost passed out in the tub when the spasms got worse because I couldn't keep myself upright. I couldn't push to get my guts moving because even the slightest amount of force was enough to make me shriek in pain. Eventually, with a concentrated effort, I was able to get things moving and I unleashed hell on our toilet. It sounds ridiculous, but I have never been in that much pain. I was absolutely terrified, and that is the closest I have ever come to being like man, I might die here. Mauled by a dog. I have no memory of most of the bites, but at one point the dog lunged and latched onto my abdomen, a bit up and to the left of my belly button. It was so terrifying and excruciatingly painful. I was convinced that the dog was going to rip my guts out. When it was over and I was being escorted to the ambulance I kept my hand pressed over the bite on my gut because I thought I must be bleeding out. The funny thing was that bite was actually NBD and pretty shallow. It was the bites I didn't feel that were severe and caused lasting damage. It happened when I was a teenager. 2 of my cousins, my mother, and I were on the way to San Francisco. I was sitting in the backseat playing on my Nintendo DS. As my cousin was making a left turn, light was green. From my peripheral vision I could see an SUV speeding towards our vehicle. I'm not sure if SUV was running a red light, the driver was distracted, or if just hitting another car for some reason was the driver's intent. It really felt like time slowed down in the few seconds prior to the accident. I remember thinking I would feel the biggest impact and would probably die because of it, since it was coming directly towards my side of the vehicle. I braced myself, said a quick prayer, thought of my father and grandmother, and everyone else we would leave behind. I remember glancing up at the point of impact and watching my DS fall from my hands. The SUV sped away. Thankfully none of us were injured, just very shocked. Hearing my mom wailing out my name, thinking I was hurt or dead right after we got hit, was the worst. In the middle of a massive bout of depression, I blacked out walking to the bathroom. Seemingly came out of nowhere, slipped, fell, knocked everything off the counter, and hit my head. Didn't pass out, but was too dizzy to try to stand. The feeling passed eventually, but I'd lost about 10 minutes when I looked at my watch. Doctor later speculated that I was severely dehydrated and hungry, since I hadn't eaten or drank anything that I could remember. I had a stupid tradition where I'd swim to an island by a campsite I go to every year. It's about a 40-minute swim. I'm a good swimmer and never really bothered taking a life jacket or floating device. One year, I got a massive leg cramp in my left leg when I was 15 minutes from shore. I thought I was done, but luckily it went away. About this time last year I had a lot of stressors that I wasn't dealing with, and then on top of those I had a friend pass away tragically and suddenly. All of these things combined and resulted in me having the first of several panic attacks on the day of my friend's vigil, but I chalked it up to graveling all day and not having eaten. The second one I also chalked up to a long day with not much food. That's why I was getting dizzy and shaky and felt like dying. I just needed to eat. The third time, I was sitting in a movie theater after dinner and having a great time and started to feel bad, so I got up to go to the restroom, where I found out that I had almost no control over my sense of equilibrium. My entire body was numb. I couldn't breathe, and my vision was starting to go black. I couldn't chalk that one up to a lack of eating. I just thought my body was in some sort of shutdown and very nearly went to the hospital. I'm in the medical field. I know anxiety attacks. I know that anxious thoughts can spiral and manifest physically. I knew all of that. But even still, it had apparently never been conveyed to me in a clear way that panic attacks were different. Panic attacks aren't preceded by anxious thoughts. They just happen, even without thinking about any stressors. It took me calling my friend coworker and describing my symptoms to her to figure it out. She then pointed out the stressors I had been dealing with, on top of the grief of my friend's death. And it became a lot more understandable why I was freaking out. I also went back to therapy. I haven't had another one since, which is nice. I thought I was dying from panic attacks too, and I didn't even recognize that's what was happening until the third time in 2 weeks. Free Zoo where I grew up used to work. There was a yak pen that ran for quite a ways a little off the road. I was walking along the road with headphones in, saw a new baby yak laying down by the fence. Made the stupid decision to go closer and see it. Long story short is my dumbass didn't hear the daddy yak charging the fences behind me until it was about 15 feet away from me. He broke one fence and dented the other. I jumped back and I swear my heart stopped for a few moments. Never went close ever again. Lesson learned. I do a ton of solo hiking, and I've been doing it pretty consistently for a long time. I've had a few moments. I've almost stepped on rattlesnakes twice. Once was at the end of Chesler Park Loop in the Needles district of Canarionlands. It was over 100 degrees, and I was 7 miles from a trailhead. I was hiking along, when on my downstep, I hear the notorious snake noise. I redirected my foot at the last second and missed it by inches, and it slithered away. It was a midget-faded rattlesnake, a highly venomous species. I have been cliffed out before. I have gotten lost. I have climbed up things I could not climb down, and down things I could not climb up. I've sprained my knee at the bottom of a 2,000-foot canyon, 7 miles from my car, with several miles of class 4 scrambling. I've fallen waist deep in quicksand twice. I thought quicksand was a myth perpetuated by cartoons. No, it's a real freaking thing and it's terrifying. I got out pretty quickly, but there are people that have legitimately been stuck before. Zion just had a rescue that took the search team 2 hours to pull a guy out. I've been drastically dehydrated. I planned a 13-mile trail to backpack in Dark Canyon, super remote wilderness in Utah. Told by many locals that a reliable spring would be running at the canyon junction. Never found the spring. Never found a pothole, stream, or anything to filter. Ended up hiking 26 miles with hardly any water. It was miserable toward the end. I had to take breaks every 50 feet, and I ended up injuring my feet for a month. I do night photography a lot in mountain lion country, and I'll sometimes run into some big-eyed predator at night with my headlamp. Usually a fox. And it scares the shit out of me. Many mammals have tapetum, which causes that eye shine at night. Something like a fox has binocular vision and big eyes, so you literally just see two huge green eyes in some bushes staring at you intently. I was caught in a storm in Zion on a long round trip hike called Deer Trap Mountain in 2016. The forecast that day was 20% chance of rain for 1 hour. It ended up being the 4th largest rain event in Zion's history. I basically hiked for 4 hours, on a mesotop, the high point, in a record-setting lightning storm, with 2 hours of hail. By the way, when I got back to my car, I had to build a bridge of rocks to get my car out of the parking lot because the road had washed out when you hike thousands of miles. Shit happens. I've definitely made some poor decisions when I was younger, but one of the greatest lessons a seasoned hiker learns is to know your limits and to be prepared. I've been very fortunate, to say the least.